and live your life today. It doesn't matter what they say.
Welcome to another episode of Red Lotus Life. I am Lori Kinsey, advanced spiral practitioner. This is Sara Elizabeth Hoffman, my co-creator with Red Lotus Life. She is a womb spiral practitioner and a spiral practitioner. And together we come here and we share our experiences. We are 100% authentic ourselves, and want to share our experiences as domestic violence and abuse survivors, and also the work that we do as we support domestic violence and abuse survivors. So welcome. This week, we are starting to wrap up the Embodiment Workshop, which we're super excited about because we have so much brewing in the background, like the retreat that's coming up soon. All of the things that you're learning, like in this workshop, you will have an experience to join us in Southern Utah, beautiful Zion National Park, Springdale, Utah, and actually in an intimate setting. Come and learn these tools with us. You will learn how we go deeper with these tools and how we use them in our everyday lives. So there's more about that. Just you can check out the link below. We'll be saying so much more as we get ready to launch that. So you'll hear about that. For now, let's go ahead and recap the embodiment clear. So it's been a minute. It's been a couple of months now. I think we did it most of the summer. Did we begin this at the beginning of summer, I feel, right?
Yeah, pretty sure.
Yeah. So the block was sympathy, and it was in the area of family love. We've been taking our time with this one because Sara Elizabeth said, oh my gosh, with this being sympathy, we have to talk about nervous system. We have to talk about parasympathetic and sympathetic states. We really need to start to connect these dots, especially with embodiment. So we introduced somatics in this one and how we practice that and some different exercises. There are 5 channels, right, that we've been covering. Okay, so far we have covered the mental channel, imagination channel, posture channel, sensation channel, and now we're wrapping up with the emotion channel today. So yeah, what have you got for us on this one, Sara?
I really love the emotion channel, especially when we're talking about embodiment, because this is one of those places where we can feel really blocked, really repressed, and it can be really, really hard to access for so many of us, especially when you have been disassociated, which is one of the reasons why I felt it was so important for us to deep dive into somatics, deep dive into these channels, because it really allows, like, we moved through all of the other channels and now we can finally start to utilize all of the other channels in order to allow the emotions to arise. So that's sort of where the challenge is for a lot of us. I know definitely that is where I was. For me, in my experience, I was one of those people sort of being very empathic and very sensitive. I was always sensitive to other people, but had, repressed and numbed my own emotions. So this process has really, really been important for me in my own experience. So I love to share these tools with all of you, and really hope it's my intention that it is serving you and that you can take even 1 or 2 things from the discussions and from the work we're doing around this embodiment clear, and take it with you into the world and utilize it and implement in your own life.
Yeah. I'm just really excited that we get to do this kind of work together, and especially doing it here on the podcast and on YouTube. I will say that this is, for me, the first channel that I disconnected from. And I feel like it probably is for most people. That's the thing that we do, right? We're vulnerable with our heart. We're vulnerable with our emotions. And that's going to be the first thing that you like, oh, okay, not going to show those anymore. And, oh, okay, I'm going to cut this off. And, or disconnect this from self, right? So excited to dive into this. Are you ready for me to share my screen?
Absolutely.
All right. Okay, can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, so somatics, the emotion channel.
Okay, again, I really, really love this one. So emotion, this is the channel where we're able to access surrender. So the emotion channel is a representation of your current experience in the sum of all of its parts. So what happens is when we have, when the nervous system initially is activated, when you go into a state of trigger, you're in the very moment. But what's actually happening is that your body's responding to something, to an experience, to a trauma, or some situation that you have already experienced in the past. But the only way that we can work with that is in the here and now. So emotions are our habits and our patterns, like the sensation channel. This channel is on the unconscious end of the spectrum. So that means it's the more feminine, it's the more watery, it's the more flow, like the more inflow. We often think of the feminine as being more, more watery, more emotional, more in our feels, for the most part, just generally speaking. So we can't make ourselves feel a feeling, but we can use the more masculine channels to allow an emotion to arise naturally. So that's what I was speaking about earlier when I was talking about, okay, so in order to really evoke that emotion, especially when we have been disassociated or dissociated, we can, tap into the mental channel. We can tap into the imagination channel. These are the more masculine channels, the posture channel, in order to begin to allow the emotions that are underneath to arise. So this channel is also recognized when we are using emotional language. That's a little bit self-explanatory, but we're talking sadness, joy, peace, curiosity. Those would be examples of emotional language. And it's really important to mention here that all of our behaviors are actually anchored by an emotion. So an example of this would be that, say you're in a state of trigger, just all of a sudden someone says something, or something happens, and all of a sudden you're triggered, you're activated, you're angry. So the emotion arises first, and it's going to be an unconscious emergence, right? Because your body's automatically responding, your nervous system is automatically responding, you're in this heightened state, and then the behaviors follow. So that's what I mean by all behaviors are anchored by emotion.
I think that last piece is super important to point out here, as saying that all behaviors are anchored by the emotion, because this is directly related to, so when we're talking about in reference to someone who has been in an unhealthy or abusive relationship, this is something that you and I were talking about, Sara Elizabeth, not long ago, where when we're not in a sovereign and healed state and we're triggered, right? We're triggered by things, then our emotions come out sideways. So this is when we start getting gaslit.
Right.
This is when we experience, you're crazy, you're not in your right mind, you need to go to a mental hospital, because our emotions will all of a sudden unconsciously come out sideways, and then everything that we are trying to communicate is not really even being heard, because what's being seen as our behaviors. So when we are able to actually master this channel, this emotion channel, along with all the other channels, which I'm really glad that this one was the last one that we're speaking on, because it's all those other masculine channels that actually help us be in a sovereign state. And then we're actually able to communicate in an effective way.
Absolutely. The other thing that I wanted to say here, just in regards to, allowing ourselves to sink into and surrender to the emotion that's arising, just like in the case that you were just describing, what we can actually do when we have learned to practice these things is to surrender that, yes, I'm having this emotion, and then we can start to use discernment in how we are responding or reacting, how our behavior is going to look moving forward. But I just want to say, like, don't feel bad if you are, when you're in a state of trigger and you are activated. It just takes practice. It's not easy, especially when you're just starting out. So please be gentle with yourself. And then from that place, once we're able to sort of surrender into it, be able to acknowledge and feel what we're actually moving through, then we can start to use discernment. And, just moving forward, it becomes easier and easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that part about being like, be gentle with yourself, because as you become more embodied, it's the emotions that just kind of flow. I want to say it's kind of like, just like what you said, it's water, right? It's water, and they're kind of just flow all over the place. And at first that can be really overwhelming. And at first it is going to come out sideways. But the more that you bring this unconscious into your conscious awareness, this is where you can actually just lean into it and learn, right? Just learn. And that's where we're talking about mastering that sovereignty. So this is probably the hardest one to master, in my opinion.
Yeah, me too, for sure. 100%. Okay. So why the emotion channel? Our bodies chemically create the state of homeostasis that we are most accustomed to. That might look like anxiety. That might look like depression. That might look like anger. And if we have really done some deep inner work, then hopefully it looks like joy, it looks like peace, it looks like happiness, and it looks like love. But also it's so important when we are looking at the emotional channel to practice invoking different emotional states. So we use the conscious channels to let emotions be. So the conscious channels, again, are the more masculine channels, that of posture, mental, imagination. So we're going to allow the emotions to be, to arise, so that we're able to digest and then reframe. The emotional channel is also important because we get to reset our habitual homeostasis by practicing being in a different emotional state. So what I mean when I'm talking about our habitual homeostasis is that our bodies, do a really good job of sort of giving us a chemical bath of cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine, all of these things that make us feel regulated, when in all actuality, we're actually very dysregulated. And we're in a heightened state, or we're in a state of anxiety, we're in a state of depression. And the longer that we stay in those states, our body begins to think that's normal, that's regulated. When in fact, it's definitely not. That's not where we want to be. So we want to practice surrendering. We want to practice a different way of being, a different emotional state for longer and longer periods of time, because the longer we can stay in an actual state of homeostasis, an actual state of regulation, then we're able to be there more and more and more. And we're able to start to feel the peace, the harmony, the love for longer periods of time.
Yeah, I can attest to this. Because my husband, he'll tell me, since I've been doing this deep, deep work, and I've actually been able to reset in this way, everything that you've been talking about, he's like, oh yeah, you experience a lot more emotions than you used to. But he says, I don't stay there for very long. I'm able to move through it faster, quicker, and just move on. Right. And that's what it all is all about. Emotions are energy in motion, and they are meant to be felt so that they can actually move through the body, move through your system, and then you're able to move on. So he said it like in the past, and I can definitely attest to this, that in the past I would be upset about something, and I would spin out. I would either totally spin out, and then I would be there for days, weeks, months, whatever. But now I feel the emotion. I let it move through, whether that's crying, happy, joy, whatever, anger, all of those things. But it moves through really quickly now. So I want to say, like, in a matter of minutes, actually, like I can be angry and it comes up and then it moves through within about 5 minutes, because I'm able to use these practices like what we're sharing with you here. So,
yeah, one of the ways that I can say that I've experienced this, just reflecting back, one of the sort of, I don't know, it's related to motherhood and with my children, and how before I was embodied, before I was doing this work and I was really dissociated, I would also spin out, and I would call it actually spiraling out with my children, because I wasn't able to hold their emotions. I couldn't be that sovereign, sort of grounded mother being, I guess are the words that I'm looking for, that they needed. And so I would go right with them. Now, I was doing my best to support them, but because I was feeling everything that they were feeling, is just like, it takes a minute, it takes practice to be able to come back to alignment, come back to, and just remain that grounded, safe place. That's the word I'm actually looking for, the grounded safety. So why the emotion channel continued? We identify our upper limits so that we stop unconsciously sabotaging our ability to experience a new way of feeling joy, peace, love, harmony. And there are so many ways that we can unconsciously sabotage that shows up for us with sickness or disease that shows up in our body. We might suddenly get cold, or catch a cold. We might suddenly just not really feel well. It can show up, chronically, long term as, major illnesses like cancer. It might show up as an injury. This happened to me. I had a major knee injury right in the beginning, at the precipice of doing this healing, the deep healing work. Direct result of exactly what we're talking about. This is where we're looking at our upper limits here. When we are able to identify our upper limits, we might actually be able to feel ourselves picking fights and arguments, because again, with the chemical bath that our body sort of sends us, our brain, our nervous system sends us, we want to stay at that upper limit because that's what feels regulated to us, when in fact it's not. We are not in harmony, and we are not in an actual regulated state. But in order to, it's like, it's an addiction, actually. I think we've talked about this in previous videos, but it is actual addiction. And we will try to pick fights and arguments in order to get back to that heightened state. And so this also looks like just suddenly out of nowhere getting upset for absolutely no reason.
Yep. This is when chaos is normal.
Right.
This is when you can really see this. Well, let's talk about the physical stuff first, right? I mean, I feel like at this point in time, most people are now beginning to understand that emotions do get stuck in the body, and they do manifest as different symptoms in the body. That can be with autoimmune disease, all kinds of things. There's many books out there. We've talked about it several times. If you have any questions with this, please let us know. Happy to talk more about that. But this other part that I think a lot of people don't understand or don't notice, because it is in the unconscious, is this part about picking the fights and arguments, suddenly getting upset for no reason. When chaos is your normal, peace feels very uncomfortable. You're always kind of like, you're in fight, flight, freeze mode. In fact, this is usually fight mode, right? Whenever you're right here, because you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're wondering, like, why are things so so great right now. And it's actually what we end up doing is we end up causing the chaos. I invite everyone who's listening to this to just notice what you notice and observe yourself with this now being in your conscious awareness, because I think a lot of survivors actually do this without even realizing that they're doing it. I know I was one of those people until this happened. And then also I can see it in others. Like I can see it in my children. I can see it, in my family. Let me put it that way. I'll just say in just extended family and everything. I can also see it now just when I'm out in public.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, the stories that we also begin to start to create so that the chaos is caused. So even if you're not purposely picking fights or arguments and you're not experiencing that and you're saying that's not me, start to think about the times when someone may not have called you or something, or you're waiting for someone to respond to a text or a message or an email or whatever it is. And then all of a sudden your mind starts to create these stories about why that person hasn't messaged you yet, or hasn't gotten back to you yet, or why you weren't invited to an event, or something. You see it on social media. This is when social media stuff really starts to go into play. So it's this unconscious part that will start to make up these stories of chaos, so that the mind can actually start to wrap its head around. It's the mind and the nervous system is such a crazy cool thing to me.
Yeah. I can never learn enough. A lifelong student for sure. Something else that I would like to point out here when we're talking about when we're witnessing others in these spaces, when they really, really need, and sometimes I think it's easier to notice it in others first so that you can identify it in yourself. That's really important. But when you are noticing other people do this, I feel like at a certain point you begin to form, or at least this has been my experience. And so I'm going to explain it in the best way that I can from my own experience. So you begin to become very hypervigilant because you expect the other to already be in this heightened state or be looking to pick a fight or an argument. And so what can happen is you become constantly hypervigilant and you start to expect that behavior. And so you can also create the chaos from that place too, because you already expect it. And so you might actually respond in a way that creates the activation and trigger. Whereas if you can pause and learn to, use some discernment, practice these things, then you might be able to actually get a different response.
Oh yeah, that goes right back into the law of attraction, right? So
yeah,
I know exactly what you're talking about, because if you're in fight, flight, freeze, and you're expecting the other to come in with chaos and they don't, then a lot of times we do create the chaos and we don't even realize it.
Right. Okay, so moving on to tapping into the emotional channel. How do we access it? So our goal here, again, is to explore surrender by consciously relaxing the body and bringing awareness to the breath. And I love this. All of these exercises continually brings us back to the breath. So what we want to do is to set a timer for 10 minutes or longer. I actually recommend longer personally, and sort of using this as a meditation practice. But if that feels hard, then 10 minutes is a great starting point. Find a place where you can relax, where you can feel safe, where you do have space and time. And so with every exhale, intentionally relax the body, relax your muscles. And every single time you exhale, do it more, really, really, really lean into it, sink into it, and do this with awareness to the emotions that are present, the emotions that are arising. So when feeling fully relaxed, continue to lean into it with every exhale, continuing to let go, continuing to just be really, really present with what is coming up. So we're noticing what emotions begin to release. And you may be really, really surprised if you can really stay with it, really remain present with the breath. You'll be able to release so much more. And from here, you can again tap into the other more conscious, more masculine channels using the imagination. So if there is an emotion that arises that's negative, then, what are you seeing? What are you visualizing? What sensations come along with it? How can you move that energy in a way that that creates a different story moving forward?
Mm-hmm. I love this exercise. And I love this statement here of our goal is to surrender, like to explore surrender by consciously relaxing the body and bringing awareness to breath. I work with a lot of people who have experienced some deep trauma. And so whenever we first begin to play with the emotion channel with an exercise like this, sometimes it can be quite overwhelming. And sometimes they can feel, again, like what I was saying, when you become associated with your body again, that it can be overwhelming. It can put you in a state of fight, flight, freeze, panic attacks, different things like that. So if this begins to happen, I say stick with it, just like what Sara Elizabeth just said. Stick with it, breathe, come back to the breath. I also would like to add here that there's a little bit of a hack here that I like to share with my clients, is that go out in nature whenever you are doing this for the first couple of times. Yeah. Go out in nature, because nature is going to support you. It's going to hold you in many, many ways. We can talk about that some in another time. But here you have the ability to use your senses. So when things start to feel overwhelming and you're starting to experience these emotions, and you're wanting to, the body is kind of getting into that panic state, I invite you to take a look around you. So use your sense of sight. Find a color that is beautiful to you. Find a flower or a plant or something like that. Listen. Start to listen to something else. See what sounds you can hear in nature. Begin to use your sense of touch. Feel the ground beneath you. Feel the earth beneath you. It's always holding you and supporting you. This is where I feel when we can start to master this emotion channel, this is where I feel like this is where the sovereignty starts to come into play, because you can literally be in the midst of chaos and total chaos, but yet you will always be able to find the beauty in every moment. So no matter what it is that you are experiencing, if that is super crazy stuff that's happening in your environment, you're always able to use one of your senses to actually catch the beauty that brings you back to center, that grounds you, and then you connect with that breath. I hope that made sense. Did that make sense, Sara?
It did. It made perfect sense. That's a really beautiful explanation.
Okay. All right. Well, was there anything else here that we needed to talk about before we start to wrap up?
I don't think so. Feel complete.
Okay. All right. Well, the emotion channel is amazing. It is, I like to play with it a lot. It's probably one of my favorites now. It used to scare me a lot, but now it's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
So,
I just heard something that I actually want to add, and I meant to touch upon it earlier, if you don't mind me going back a little bit. Don't be afraid of your emotions. Once you do start to practice and utilize these tools, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to feel any feeling that does come up. But what's really, really important is that you do have grace for yourself, and that you do provide yourself a safe place to move the energy. And even better is if you feel safe with a partner or with a soul sister or with a friend, or, you know, any person who can be there to hold a safe space for you. It's amazing when you can actually be witnessed, and also feel safe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know that when you can be supported and you have someone that you can process with, a safe
Mm-hmm.
person to be able to do that with, that is important. And yes, absolutely. Don't be afraid of your emotions. I know it can be scary and overwhelming at first, but honestly, there's the other side of those emotions too, right? You have
Yeah.
like anger and sadness and all of those things, but also on the other side are all these beautiful emotions like peace, love, happiness, joy. And when you're able to truly access that at any given moment, your whole world changes. You're able to change the situation and the state of your system, I guess, right? That's what we've been talking about like this whole time, this integration, is you get to change that state.
Yeah, you do get to change that state. And also there are times when anger is appropriate and it's okay. And we have been so conditioned within our society that it's not okay. Anger's not okay. And so we repress and repress and repress and repress. And when we finally start to do this work, we can really, you know, when we come back into alignment with ourselves, we're back in the body, back in sovereignty, back in our power. Then when we're able to really express that anger as sacred rage in a healthy way, total game changer.
Oh, it is. I mean, that's when you're able to effectively communicate, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's when we're effectively able to establish boundaries and just anything and everything that we've been talking about since the beginning of the year here.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I feel like, oh, this is the type of stuff that we're going to start to talk about. This is the type of stuff that we've been saying is brewing here in this space.
I'm excited for those conversations.
Yeah, me too. All right. So anything else?
No, I'm good now. For sure this time.
All right. Well, I think we have one more where we're going to be wrapping this up, and then we're going to start to dive into something totally new and different. You're going to hear our conversations in such an authentic way and things that we're personally moving through. Yeah. So as always, huge gratitude for you being here and sharing the space with us. We know that your energy and your time is your most valuable resources. So thank you for sharing it here with us. If you enjoyed this, please like this content because it helps us know this is what it is that you're looking for. If you have questions, please ask the questions below. Subscribe if you do enjoy this, because especially if you're in the Embodiment Workshop, because then you're going to get the notification when the next one comes out that wraps it up. And if there's somebody that you know that could benefit from this, please share it. That's actually why we're here, is to share what it is that you find valuable here with us. Also, if you are interested in learning more, we do have a couple of areas where you can dive deeper with us. You can find all of that information below in the description as well. We do have a Red Lotus Life membership. We 100% dive into things that we can't dive into here on all the socials and the public places. We also have this self-clearing retreat that is coming up. And this is where you are literally going to learn the self-clearing tool, the emotional clearing tools, embodiment tools, all of that with us in an intimate, most beautiful setting, one of the most beautiful places in the world. And yeah, I think that just about does it, right? Anything else?
Yeah, just speaking to the retreat really quickly, the retreat center where it's going to be held is in one of the absolutely most gorgeous, most majestic places in the world that I've ever seen, that I've ever been to personally. I feel just so blessed and so much gratitude to be able to be in that space and to share it with you and to be held by the mother. It's such a safe place. And Lori and I, we just truly desire to hold you with as much love and safety as we can actually offer ourselves. And we just invite you, please do come.
I know. It's going to be really amazing, actually. I
Yeah.
can't wait until we can actually start talking about this more and what we're going to be doing there and how people can deepen their own practices. So, okay. All right. Well, have an amazing, fabulous day, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
And live your life to